because it sucks you in. You get so passionate about seafood. Like everywhere you go, you'll eat seafood. When you're immersed in this seafood world, you actually go out and you actually try and find better seafood when you even eat at home.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Australia is blessed with some of the most incredible seafood in the world. Often, though, we leave the cooking of our stunning seafood in the capable hands of professional chefs. But what does it take to create a successful seafood restaurant? Grant Schooling is the executive chef of Louca's in Adelaide, South Australia. Grant, how are you going?
Good, how are you?
Good. It's good to have you on the show. You've been in the world of seafood very much so in the last couple of years. What's it like plumbing the depths to create a seafood restaurant?
It's never ending of like motivation of finding different species. I find it's always exciting getting something different all the time. I find that fishermen in particular are very passionate about what they do. And I think that the connection between a chef and a fisherman is very similar. And there's just an abundance of different textures, flavours, species, which I find is a bit different to the meat industry. It's a little bit probably like what a vegetarian chef would be. There's just so much out there, so much undiscovered. So I find it really interesting as a chef and it keeps you motivated.
Well, tell us a bit about the program there. You mentioned underutilized and rare sort of species. What's the process? Do you have do you leave it in the hands of the fishermen that you deal with?
Pretty much, you have no choice but to leave it in their hands. We have people like Chris Bolton, for instance. Like you never know what he's going to catch. Like he's always catching coral trout or saddle-tail snapper or something. But there's every now and then one fish will come out like a coronation trout, something different that he gets, and we pretty much have that relationship where he knows I'll take that straight away, and we use social media to get that out. So, and that's pretty much how it works. You never know what you're going to pull out of the water. So, if it's edible and it's a pretty looking fish, like I'll pretty jump on it. That's for sure.
Well, take us into the kitchen. What's the secret to cooking seafood? And do you have a couple of dishes that you can tell us about that kind of exemplifies what you're doing there at Louca's?
With seafood, I find you can't do too much to it, especially the seafood that we buy, because it's so expensive. It's been handled, beautifully by some of the fishermen, and that I find the more simple you can do is better. What we do here at Louca's is we just buy the freshest, the best seafood possible, and we don't do too much to it. One of our specialties here would be something like a whole coral trout, which we barbecue over charcoal first, and we season it really well, and then we'll transfer it to a flat grill. And we'll really slowly just cook on the flat grill with a lid over the top. So it's just slowly cooking, and we'll continue to keep turning it. So it's kind of basting in its own juices. While that's going, like we will make just a simple burnt butter and caper sauce. And it's just as much as using really good butter, burning it a little bit and putting nice crispy capers in there. And once the fish is just cooked on the bone, like we'll serve it and pour that sauce over, and that's all we really need to do.
When did food become of interest for you?
Food for me, like I come from a family that have been cooks for many generations. Like I was about 7 years old. My mum was working in a French restaurant called the Vines down in Kangarilla. And there's a photo going about that of me. I think I was about seven years old, and I was polishing cutlery. And I always remember, like when I was down there, peeling onions, listening to the chefs. Like they're always there were a couple of French chefs there that were always talking about food and the smells. I can always remember it. And I just remember when I was about 14 and I was at high school, and we had one of those classes where they were like, what do you want to do for a living? I already knew what I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be a chef. So the teacher just said, you can just go straight and start looking for like work experience. And that's what I did. So I just went straight into a kitchen, and it always felt right. Like I always remember walking in, the first place I went to was the James Craig. It's a pub down in south of Adelaide. And I remember back then you could smoke in the bar, like, and the bar used to smell like stale beer and stale cigarettes. And that smell to me was just like, oh, this is like, what is this? Like, and the kitchen was like really cool, you know, really gastro food, pies and stuff like that. And I just felt really comfortable.
Tell us about the years during your apprenticeship. Is there any key moments or memories that you have?
Yeah, a lot of moments. Like through my apprenticeship, I did through an agency, and they would always chop and change you different pubs and stuff like that. One of the things that I was lucky enough to work with some really good lecturers that would always encourage all their students to do competitions. Back then, there was no like golden chef's hat. There was always like cooking comps that the gas company would put on. There'd be like a top hat award, and then there was some different industry like ones where you basically be battling each other all the time, like different recipes and like food boxes and stuff like that. And you were always, as an apprentice, you were encouraged to do that, and that was a really, really lot of fun. Like, we used to compete a lot, and you used to win quite a bit, which was good. And that would like once I was near towards the end of my career, my apprenticeship, I ended up leaving HGTs, and I started at Salsa around that time.
Well, Salsa was one of the best Italian restaurants in the area. Well, tell us a bit about what it was like in the kitchen there.
It was pretty brutal. Like I worked under Marco. Like Marco was a bit of a psychopath. But like the chefs that I worked with in there were like, I don't know, they did something for me. Like at the time I never knew it. I always thought it was pretty like hardcore, and I was scared all the time. But the food that they used to do there was like breaking the rules, like full flavored. It was all about taste. Like there was no recipe cards, there was no teaching. It was all about getting the best out of everything. Everything flavor based and really rustic. And the food was always amazing, and that really stuck for me. And I always remember, like, Marco once, like, he was yelling at me for something, and, like, he just goes, like, what I teach you, you're going to, like, because I'm yelling and screaming at you, I'm going to teach you something that you can be able to go into any restaurant and you'll be able to, ask for whatever you want and you'll get it. Like, and it wasn't until, like, probably 10 years later that he was actually right. I could walk into a place and he'd really like put something in me where I could break rules, and my food was pretty amazing, like with flavour and the concepts that I'd come up with.
Pubs were a real key feature for you in the very, very early days, but they were also integral. You made a bit of a name for yourself with World's End. Tell us about that time.
Yeah, like when I left like Salsa, I started at the World's End. I worked under a chef called Darren, who was just this big cuddly bear, like was, great, like beautifully natured, totally different to where I came from Salsa, like, and he would just let me do whatever I wanted, like specials and stuff like that. And the pub was very grungy at the time, and I was probably there for about 8 months, and then he ended up leaving. He was like, "Look, here's your opportunity. I think you're ready. Take it over. Do your own thing." Like, he was really encouraging, and I thought that I was ready. So, and yeah, I did it. Within like 2 weeks of him leaving, like I set up a new menu, like just did something really totally out there. I think it was like Moreton Bay, like garlic Moreton Bay bugs and stuff that pubs hadn't really seen. I was doing steaks with like whole roasted garlic on top. Um, and at the same time, there was this competition that just started. It's called Mushroom Mania, and I entered it and not even thinking of really winning anything. Just thought, oh, this will be fun, like something to do, and promote it through the pub. And in the same like kind of week that we were doing that, like I got a my first review from Tony Love, pretty well known. Like he was a food writer back then. He's now a wine writer, but and yeah, lucky guy, I got a really good review from him. He came in twice, and he gave a pretty high score for a pub back then. And about a month after that, I found out that I actually won like the South Australian Award for the mushrooms, and went on to win 3 years in a row after that. That was pretty good. And during that time, like, you know, Adelaide's food scene was very underground. Sydney, like you'd look at Sydney and just go like, that place is like amazing. And Adelaide gets snubbed all the time by eastern states.
Competitions have been a real feature of your career. You ended up competing in the World Culinary Olympics in Beijing in China. How did that all start, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, so like part of the Mushroom Awards, there'd always be like a national winner in Australia that would end up being able to compete in China. They had an Olympic style competition that was sponsored by the World Industry Association over there, which is like huge because mushrooms are like you know, Australia has meat and veg. Over there, like in China, they have like meat and mushrooms. It's so important to them. They've got 10,000 different species to eat. So it's really, really important over there. And they put on a competition every year that was like super serious to them. Like, and they'd invite all these different chefs from all around the world to compete. And to get into it for the Australian side of it, you had to just enter this Mushroom Mania competition. And I'd left the World's End by then. I was at a hotel and I'd only been there for like 4 weeks, and the Mushroom Mania came around again, and I was like, oh, I want to, you know, compete again, do this. It'd be good for the hotel. And they promoted mushrooms throughout the hotel. And when all the judging was done and stuff, because they'd have like secret like diners come through and that, and yeah, found out that I'd won the national, and it gave me the ticket to go to China and compete and represent Australia. In Australia, it's not a really big thing, but when you got to China, it was massive. Like you got bussed around with all other chefs. It went for 8 days. We were there for 8 days. It was like really serious, and it was in like a big like English language school, and the whole time you're there, like you're treated pretty much like a celebrity. And you get to like try all these different mushrooms you've never tried before in your life. The chefs that are competing, like you're just exchanging knowledge. You know, it was totally different to what I had ever experienced. When you compete in a cooking competition here, you don't talk to nobody. Like, you know, you bring your own knives, all your own equipment, and you keep everything to yourself. But over there, like, it was like, oh, you know, what are you doing? You know, and they were showing different skills, and we were cooking different flavors. Like, especially when it came into the time when we had to do all our prep work, they gave us like a full day of prep. One of the funniest stories is when we came to do our ordering for what we needed for the competition. I asked for fresh chicken, and they gave me live chickens. I was like, oh, what am I going to do with these? And they're like, oh, you just kill them. And I'm like, oh, I can't do it. Like, and the head chef who was overseeing the competition, he's like, don't worry, I'll organise it for you. And he went and got it done. And then when he gave them back to me, they were whole and still warm. Like, so I just quickly took the breasts off of them because I only needed the chicken breasts, and I just quickly put them in the fridge, get cold, like. But
did you get to experience much of the local food culture in China while you were there?
Yeah, so while we were there, it was on the 5th ring, which is in a bit of a slum area. But some of the Chinese chefs took us into the slum area, and some of the food that we had there was quite weird, for an Australian palate. But it was unreal. We tried. We were at breakfast once, and they have a traditional Chinese breakfast, or you can have a Western breakfast. And one particular day, we were at breakfast, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to try the Chinese breakfast." And I'm having these steam buns, and they're all laughing at me, and I'm like, "What's going on?" And the interpreter goes, "Oh, you like that steam bun?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's a bit spicy, it's really nice. What is it?" And they said the Chinese name for dog, and I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And they're like, "Woof woof." And I was like, "Oh, dog." And they're like, "Yeah, it's like a dog steam bun." I'm like, "Oh, okay." But we got taken out to different places like Great Wall of China, different food places. Went to the one of the very first restaurants that started Peking duck. That was unreal. They've been doing Peking duck for centuries. Pretty amazing experiences.
When did the focus turn to seafood for you?
Seafood, the main focus turning to seafood is more when I met Peter at Louca's. There's just something, Peter's restaurant is quite special. And the seafood that Peter, his immense knowledge of seafood is unreal. He's come from nearly a 5th generation seafood family. When I first started at Louca's, my seafood knowledge was, I knew all the basics, King George whiting, squids, that type of thing. But the thing with seafood is it draws you in. And when you start learning about coral trout and different species, mullets, and it just draws you in. I can't explain it until you experience it. I've had chefs come start here, and they think they know about seafood. Oh, yep, and then they go, oh, I have no idea. The immense amount of seafood. We get sent seafood that's not local. We get told it's local, and Peter will walk in the kitchen and go, "Where'd you get that from?" And I'll be like, "Oh, got it from this supplier," and he'll be like, "It's not local." And well, how do you know that? And he goes, "The colour, the look." He goes, "I'm telling you now, it's not local." And you delve a little bit deeper, and sure enough, it's not local. He knows stuff like octopus that's come from Victoria. He just knows by the colour of it. South Australian ockie is a little bit more purple, and and Victorian ockie's a little bit browner. They're just things that chefs would never know. But he does because he's been around it his whole life.
This episode is proudly supported by Montague, handpicked for you.
The things that we're really looking for in plums, first of all, they've got to be sweet. We're really looking for a full flavour explosion in our plums. Red flesh is critically important to us, higher in antioxidants, so all that good stuff. And then we're also looking to add a slightly firmer texture, so there's almost a little crunch. That's the real driver for us.
For more information, go to montague.com.au.
What are the underappreciated species that you think people should be using?
That's a good question. It's a hard one. I think underutilized is a word in seafood. It's just, yeah, that question with seafood, it's hard to say. Like, there's just so much seafood out there that anything that hasn't been discovered, or it's a fish that, like, an unutilized fish for me could be like bite snapper, but a lot of people wouldn't like bite snapper because they're bony. It's got lots of bones, but the flavor is unreal. Like, it's an old school fish and chip shop fish. Deep sea perch is another one. It's a fish that you can only pretty much pan fry. It's got a lot of moisture, so you can't deep fry it, but the flavor is unreal. And not, that's a fish that's been lost in time. Another problem with the seafood industry, 10 or 15 years ago, is that so many species with different names. Like, it's been on TV a lot of investigations. I think John Sussman's, tried to nut it out quite a bit as well. Blue grenadier can be called 5 different things. So that question is a hard question with seafood. I think it's more the underutilized stuff is the more older stuff that people have forgotten about. Everyone goes for King George whiting all the time. Like, it's a great fish. It tastes all right, but it's not the best.
What's the first seafood that you remember working with in a kitchen?
For me, probably squid. Like, a lot of squid. Because I've come from a pub background, it always comes in frozen. It's always Vietnamese. Like, it's already been cleaned. Like, we do everything from scratch at Louca's. Like, we've had squid this morning come in fresh. They've just been caught last night. We'll clean that from scratch, like Moreton Bay bugs, stuff like that. Back then, like, Moreton Bay bugs, squid, it was all like super cheap. Like, and it was a pub staple, salt and pepper squid and stuff. These days, like, it's a lot more expensive. I think one of the biggest things that Peter's taught me is that that, like, local seafood, like, it might be expensive, but you can still make money from it, and you should use it. Like, it's a bit of a, like, coming from a pub background, you're always pressured for your figures and stuff like that, and so you always go for the $7 a kilo squid. You don't care where it comes from. Like, since meeting Peter, like, even when I took a break from Lucas and I went to a pub, like, I still try to use local seafood. Like, he taught that for me, that the importance of using fresh, local as much as possible.
You mentioned that you took a break from Lucas and went and worked for a pub again. What brought you back to Lucas to take the role that you have?
For, like, Peter, in the early days when I first started here, reminded me a lot about, a bit like Marco. He wasn't physically abusive, but, like, he was hard in the kitchen. And it didn't take too long before we had a disagreement and I ended up quitting. The funniest thing is about that is, like, I ended up going back to a pub because I always find pubs an easy cop-out for me. Like, it's not a challenge. Like, it's just an easy way. It's good money. Like, it's good hours and stuff. But when I was back at the pub, me and Peter, after we had that argument, I ended up quitting. We ended up becoming really good friends. And we never stopped, like, talking, like, on a weekly basis about food, about seafood, about different dishes. And a few months down the track, unfortunately, like, Angela, one of the front of house manager, and is a really close friend of Peter's, and she's part owner, she was diagnosed with a really aggressive bile duct cancer, and that really shook Peter up. Or everybody, anyone who found out about it. She didn't have long to live. They gave her, I think, like, less than 3 months. And then that came to the time where Peter was like, we'd love to have you back. And I was like, yeah, I'm keen to come back and take on the challenge. And he said he'd give me full reign so he could concentrate on Angela's treatment. And I haven't looked back, like, since day one, like, getting here, like, me and Peter just said, right, we're going to look for the best seafood. Like, we're going to start contacting people like Chris Bolton, all these different fishermen who are famous on Instagram, or we're just going to just haggle them, because at the start it was really hard to get onto them. Like, some fishermen would just direct me straight to Costa in Sydney, and the prices would be like astronomical, and you'd be like, I can't even make money on that. And eventually we got there, and Peter just let's, while he's concentrating on other things, it's your baby, and yeah, it's been an amazing ride. And Angela's still fighting her cancer, and she's nearly 2 years on, and she's still here, which is amazing. Her fight is now we're opening a new restaurant, so things just, the whole outlook have changed.
You mentioned the challenges of working with Peter originally, but he's renowned with his knowledge of seafood. What's it been like working with him and creating such a successful seafood restaurant in Louca's?
It's actually pretty amazing. Like, his knowledge is unbelievable. I think with what's happened with Angela, he has changed quite a lot. They go out to dinner a lot, and they see what other people are producing. They can be really brutal in their critiquing, and I always use that as some chefs would have quit by now, but I use it as a guide to make me a better chef, and to go harder and push the boundaries of what we can experiment and flavour concepts and stuff like that.
Why do you think South Australia is so special for seafood?
We've got an abundance of different species. The temperature of the water, like Spencer Gulf has like a total gem of, kingfish is unbelievable. Squid is unreal. Octopus that's different to everywhere. It's a bit tenderer. Squid is amazing. It's got like I find like a vanilla like type flavour in it, sweet. We've got beautiful, amazing scallops, like mussels. People talk about pippies are really good. I find pippies are still more of a bait fish, but bit of bait. But like our king prawns, like you can't king prawns, like Queensland prawns, like banana prawns are great. But you can't beat Spencer Gulf king prawns. They're just sweet and plump and juicy. You're just not getting them anywhere else. Like, they've got that rainbow tail, like beautiful colours. Like, the oki that we get here is unbelievable. Like, the flavour is really nice.
You briefly mentioned that you'll be opening a new restaurant. Can you tell us a bit about it? Will it be seafood focused?
Yeah, so Peter and Angela have joined forces with George from George's on Weymouth, which you know quite well. And they've taken on a space in Henley Square. It's going to be called Henley, and yeah, it's going to be seafood based, like all utilising local seafood, casual dining. It's probably due to open in about 8 weeks' time, so pressure's on. It'll be good because like it opens up more doors for people like Chris Bolden and stuff. We'll be ordering a lot more. And Luke in Sydney, like another good fisherman of ours, like we'll just have a constant supply of really good seafood from around Australia, because we've really worked out a good system where we get it on direct flights. Pretty much like Chris Bolden will go fishing, and within like a couple of hours, he'll have it boxed up and it'll be on a direct flight from Cairns. And we've got a bit of a movie like in the pipeline. It's like a short film on how quickly we can get seafood from the other side of the corner of Australia to be like sea to plate, basically.
You have a great connection with producers. Can you tell me about some of the catchers and growers that you work with? Yeah,
so like I find with fishermen, they're much like a chef. They're pretty passionate about what they do, and to have a good relationship with them, like being in constant contact with them when they're going fishing, weather patterns, stuff like that, what they're catching. Always talking about, different textures, and we'll exchange dishes. Like I'll send them a photo of the dish that they caught, and you always get, good feedback, or, especially with like people like Chris Bolton, Ben Pethwick in Western Australia. They're all pretty like foodies. So like they send you a fish and they'll be like, well, this is quite flaky. It's white fish, it's great for sashimi. Chris Bolton's really good for that. He'll send, some different species and he'll be like, this is more for like ceviche, or he sent us a yellowfin emperor the other day, because not all fish is perfect. So he sent us these yellowfin, and Chris Bolton was like, look, these are known to be tough. And sure enough, like we put it up on the board and we sold one, and we couldn't serve it. It was just too tough. And, you win some and you lose some. There's more wins than there are losses. But that's the type of relationship. He could have easily just sent us the fish and we paid the bill, and, we'd be like, what's wrong with this fish, But that type of relationship with your producer is where he can be like, look, it has been known, like it can be a bit tough. Just keep in mind. He gave us a tomato cod a few weeks ago. Absolute beautiful fish. But once again, he was like, look, they're known to have worms, and a lot of them. So I'm not even charging you for this fish. Like, just use it for a photo, experiment with it, open it up, just check, just make sure. We haven't had much experience with worms and stuff like that. All the seafood we get is extremely fresh. We opened it up. I took photos, sent it back to Chris, and yeah, sure enough, he's like, yeah, see those marks there? That's worms. So, that's why it's so important to have a really good relationship. Because we could have easily, served that to a customer without even knowing. It's all about learning knowledge.
How much have you changed as a chef since taking this dive into the seafood world?
Quite a bit. Like, I eat quite a bit of seafood. When I do get the chance to eat out. I was just in Yorks last week, and I was in a local pub. The sea's right in front. You order like a seafood basket, and you just go, this has got to be local. How could it not? And you're tasting it, and you just go, yeah, this squid is not local. The King George whiting was local, but I find because it sucks you in. You get so passionate about seafood. Everywhere you go, you'll eat seafood. Even if I go to supermarkets, I'll try and buy the best seafood. Like Coles has Combe Bay barramundi. We used to have Combe Bay, but because Coles took it, we don't buy it anymore. We found Coral Coast, which is a little bit better than Combe Bay. But even when you're immersed in this seafood world, you actually go out and you actually try and find better seafood when you even eat at home.
What do you love about what you do?
For me, I don't know anything different. My whole life has been around food. I love food. I love the people. I love all the chefs that I've been privileged to work with. Of course, there's a lot of chefs out there that are assholes, arrogant, that won't teach you anything. I've always had the attitude of, knowledge is king, and it needs to be passed on to the younger chefs. I've always will take all my apprentices under my wing and will always be in contact with them. I love seeing their journey, as being a chef. It's an amazing feeling that, I have one chef that she's worked all around Australia. She's now doing childcare, but, it's good that passion. I've got another chef that worked at Shabosho. He had a big drug problem when he was with me, and I was pulled him aside many times and said, dude, you got to knock it out, man. You're going to be a really good chef one day, and you're throwing it away. And he ended up going to Jabot Show, and he's doing amazing things now, like those sort of things that make being a chef special, and make what I love about this industry.
Well, Grant, we've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear your story. Good luck with the new restaurant in Henley Square, opening a bit later this year. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.